What's up, guys? Happy Thursday! Welcome to the Attachment Confessions. My name is Chelsea, and I am super grateful that out of all of the amazing podcasts you could be listening to right now, you decided to hang out with me today for episode 21. Just in case you're new around here, let me give you the deets on what the Attachment Confessions is all about. From the moment I discovered attachment science, everything about every relationship I had ever been in finally made sense. And now I'm figuring out what it takes to earn my attachment security and have the best possible relationships from now on. Here on the Attachment Confessions, we'll be diving into all things attachment science while you guys tag along on my attachment healing adventure. My hope is that by bringing attachment science to those of you who have never heard of it before, and by sharing my own story, you'll also be inspired to set out on your own attachment healing journey. Because let me tell you what, guys, life is so much sweeter on the other side of your insecure attachment. Speaking of, if this podcast is helping you finally make sense of your dating life, please follow, rate, and review. It turns out the AI overlords love seeing ratings on podcasts, so taking 30 seconds to go do those things is actually very beneficial for growth and getting discovered by other listeners. So please go do those things. And thank you so much to those of you that already have. Before we get started on today's topic, I have something exciting to share with you guys. The Attachment Confessions has teamed up with Dwell Apparel to give listeners of the podcast 15% off your purchase. Dwell makes awesome, faith-inspired clothing, drinkware, and accessories for men, women, and kiddos. They have the cutest designs, definitely something for everybody's style, so go check them out. I love Dwell because not only are you shining the light of the world by wearing their super comfy tees and sweatshirts or using their drinkware when you're on the go, you're also supporting a small family-owned business based out of the great state of Idaho. So it's a win-win situation. Visit dwellapparel.com to check out all their merch and use the discount code Chelsea Scott at checkout to save 15% off your entire order. That's all one word spelled CHELSEASCOTT for 15% off. I'll also include my direct referral link in the show notes if you want to just click on that. It'll take you straight to where you need to go to check their stuff out. Mother's Day will be here before you know it, so if you've got some shopping to do for any of the Jesus-loving moms in your life, Dwell Apparel has got you covered, fam. Alrighty, so today is part 3 of our current 4-part series where we're putting each attachment style under the microscope to examine all of them closer than we ever have here on the pod. Episode 19 was dedicated to the anxious preoccupied, and episode 20 was all about our dismissive avoidance. Today, we're putting on blast the insecure attachment that I've personally been working towards healing, the fearful avoidant. And since this episode hits particularly close to yours truly, I'm not holding back any punches. So, let's all grab our one-way tickets to Cringeville and take a good hard look at the FA, shall we? For our attachment confessions first-timers who are like, what the heck even is all this? The science of attachment refers to the attachment style every single one of us on this planet forms in childhood due to the emotional attunement level or lack thereof of our parents or primary caregivers. This formed attachment style then goes on to shape and predict how we behave in romantic relationships for the rest of our lives. Shockingly, attachment formation typically happens between 0 to 5 years of age, which I know probably sounds bewildering, right? Or at least I was personally surprised to learn this. But just because we don't have a ton of memories to recall from that age range doesn't matter at all, because whether we like it or not, our nervous systems remember. So, how does the fearful avoidant insecure attachment form in childhood? 2 words: childhood trauma. Particularly, trauma experienced from one or both of the child's parents or primary caregivers. This could be big T or little t trauma. Big T trauma means there was one major life altering situation or possibly multiple significant traumatic situations. Little t trauma means smaller, seemingly more harmless incidents compounded throughout childhood that one might not even realize is traumatic, like having parents that bickered a lot. They didn't necessarily have knockout, drag down fights in front of the child, but there was just a constant low hum of tension or little digs they'd jab at each other. Overall, just not a lot of love and affection displayed between the two of them, which, as you can imagine, is not a healthy relationship being modeled to the child and makes for general uncomfortability in the home. When it comes to big T trauma, this could be attributed to a multitude of experiences. Some common ones would be growing up in a highly emotionally chaotic household, experiencing abuse from a parent, or having a parent with a significant addiction or mental health issues. Perhaps the child experienced the death of a parent when they were young, or a parent that went to prison. Maybe the parents had a nasty divorce where the child felt caught in the middle of the parents' drama or used as a pawn, which is a form of parentification. Parentification of any kind can shape a fearful, avoidant, insecure attachment. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with that term, parentification is essentially role reversal of the parent child relationship, where the child is forced to take on adult responsibilities, whether that be emotionally or practically within their family. Some examples of parentification would be providing emotional support, like mediating conflicts between parents, acting as a confidant or unofficial therapist for their parents, taking on the role of primary caretaker to siblings, or assisting with finances. Parentification goes beyond normal empathy or occasional support. It becomes the norm and even the expectation of the child. And this is just developmentally inappropriate. Kids are meant to be kids. They are not supposed to have to carry the weight and the burden of their parents' emotions and all of these adult like responsibilities themselves. If you've been with me since the very beginning of this podcasting journey, you'll recall that my fearful, avoidant, insecure attachment formed after having discovered that my dad suffered from bipolar disorder. This discovery came about through a highly traumatic event that completely changed everything I thought I knew about my dad and life in general. I won't revisit the details today, but if you want to hear my full story, check out episode 2, The Fearful Avoidant, How I Got Here. Now, I want to clarify something really quick. If you listened to our deep dive on the dismissive avoidant, you'll recall I talked about one way the dismissive avoidant attachment can form is if the child experienced an extremely traumatic situation, confided in their parents about said situation, and then were ignored, dismissed, or rejected instead of being shown love, empathy, and protection. The difference here is that with the dismissive avoidant, the traumatic experience they initially encountered wasn't brought upon them by their parents. It was their parents' response to that traumatic situation and then their inappropriate handling of that child's emotional experience that formed the dismissive avoidant attachment. However, with the fearful avoidant, it is from one or both parents that the child directly experiences said trauma. Hopefully that makes sense. Now, I know that I've mentioned several times that the primary attachment formation age range is 0 to 5 years old. However, it can absolutely form outside of that age range depending on when the child experiences trauma. For me personally, I was 13 when my dad's bipolar incident happened, which went on to shape my fearful, avoidant, insecure attachment. But remember how I said our nervous systems always remember? Well, I was about 3 years old when my dad was initially diagnosed with bipolar disorder and went on medication. I can't necessarily recall any traumatic incidents from that time or the tension and unsettling feelings that filled my house, but it is imprinted on my nervous system. However, when his second bipolar incident occurred 10 years later, after he suddenly stopped taking his medication, It wasn't only an impression on my nervous system, it became a traumatic core memory of mine that has subconsciously determined all my romantic relationship patterns ever since. So, what does this childhood trauma create in terms of core wounds? For the fearful avoidant, their primary attachment wound is the fear of betrayal. And similar to the anxious preoccupied, FAs also have a fear of abandonment, simply because abandonment is a specific type of betrayal. Experiencing trauma directly from the person or two people that are supposed to love and protect them the most is highly confusing to the child's nervous system. Love and pain essentially get fused together because their parent was a source of both. They have a difficult time trusting others because they subconsciously believe that the people that love them the most will ultimately hurt them. This goes on to explain their secondary attachment wound of unworthiness. Their nervous system believes that if someone truly loves them, they wouldn't ever hurt them. So, therefore, since they experienced pain from what is supposed to be the source of safe, unconditional love, they must not actually be worthy of love. They learn that love is unsafe, conditional, and can be extremely hurtful. To combat this, they form a highly acute sense of hypervigilance. In my personal experience, I had to be on guard at all times and fully aware of my dad's mood so that I then knew whether to avoid him or comfort him or try and calm him down, etc. My hypervigilance kept me safe because I never knew what version of my dad was about to walk in the door. My fixation on the emotional temperature of my house became a survival mechanism, and I needed to adapt to however my dad was feeling at all times in order to feel safe, remain in his good graces, and try my best to keep the peace in the house. I'm sure my mom and older brother both felt the same way too. It's scary for anybody dealing with someone they love who is sick, suffering from a mental illness that they're totally in the throes of. But as a 13-year-old girl who had never seen this side of my dad, it was like being transported to a hell I had no experience living in. My dad is an amazing human and we have the best relationship, so I hate talking about him in this way, but painting the picture of how my fearful avoidant attachment formed is an important story to tell so that it makes sense to you guys that are listening. Side note, I love you so much, Dad. Let's talk about where the fearful avoidant lies in terms of the attachment spectrum. Remember, on one end, we have the anxious preoccupied, and on the totally opposite end, we have the dismissive avoidant. Sitting very pretty in the middle between those two, we have secure attachment. The fearful avoidant is the most complex, not bragging, of all the attachments because it operates across all ends of the attachment spectrum. The fearful avoidant is essentially a combo pack of the anxious preoccupieds and the dismissive avoidance wounding and needs. We have both anxious tendencies and avoidant tendencies. We want love and affection, but are also terrified of getting too close. This is why you may have heard of this attachment style referred to as disorganized attachment. The attachment styles of anxious and avoidant were first revealed in 1970 thanks to Mary Ainsworth's famous strange situation experiment. It actually wasn't until 20 years later in 1990 that the third insecure attachment was identified, disorganized attachment. 2 decades after Mary Ainsworth's findings, as psychologists continued studying attachment further, they were able to determine that there are individuals that project both anxious and avoidant behaviors. These behaviors are situationally dependent, and they're also dependent on where their romantic partner lies on the attachment spectrum. For example, if a fearful avoidant is dating an anxious preoccupied, that's going to cause the FA to lean opposite of their AP partner and gravitate toward the avoidant end of the spectrum. On the other hand, if they happen to be dating a dismissive avoidant, that's going to eventually cause them to lean into the anxious side of their attachment. I know, I know. Us FAs are a freaking trip. All of this became so crystal clear to me when I discovered attachment theory last year and reflected on my two most recent relationships. I behaved so differently in each of those. I was in a 10-year relationship with a fellow fearful avoidant. However, he naturally leaned highly anxious. Because of that, I was more of an avoidant partner. Fast forward to my next relationship, which was just shy of 2 years. I was dating a dismissive avoidant, which caused me to eventually lean into the anxious side of my fearful avoidant attachment. Once I learned about attachment science and the different attachment styles, it was like the biggest light bulb moment of my life, and everything about those relationships made total sense. As fearful avoidants, we desperately crave connection and emotional intimacy, which is our anxious side, but are also deeply afraid of getting too close and being betrayed, aka our avoidance side. This continuous dance of longing for connection with our partner 1 minute, then pushing them away in fear of getting hurt the next, is what creates the classic fearful avoidant hot and cold pattern in our relationships. We want love and connection so bad, but learned in childhood that love gets you hurt. It isn't safe. So we're living in survival mode, subconsciously, of course, just waiting for the other shoe to drop. For FAs, it's not a matter of if our partner is going to betray us, it's a matter of when. This hot and cold pattern is our attachment system trying to meet two valid needs simultaneously, which are love and self protection. Both of these are then integrated together to make up the fearful avoidant attachment style. The hypervigilance we developed as kids runs on high alert trying to keep us safe. Because if we're prepared for pain or betrayal, when it actually happens, well, we were ready for it all along. It is strictly a self preservation strategy etched into our nervous system. Survival of the fittest, right? Now, when I say betrayal, most of us naturally think of like the absolute worst things that you can do to someone, right? Like finding out your partner has cheated or discovering that they're not the person at all that they claim to be or who you thought they were, like they've been living a double life. And those would certainly be betrayals, obviously. But for the fearful avoidant, betrayals can be less significant scenarios too. Like, if your partner tells you they're going to pick up the house before you get home, and then when you walk in the door, you see nothing has been picked up at all. Life happens, right? Maybe something unexpected came up, or it simply slipped their partner's mind. Whatever. Nothing earth shattering, right? Well, for the FA, this is a sign that their partner can't be trusted to do what they said they're going to do. Subconsciously, the fearful avoidant is looking for confirmation bias in their partner at all times. Since their nervous system is conditioned to scan for whatever can go wrong will go wrong, they view even small transgressions as a way of proving their partner isn't trustworthy. They take keeping your word very seriously, like, no room for error with that sort of thing. Fearful avoidants tend to subconsciously seek out things to be critical about in their partner. They think in very black and white terms, totally unable to live in the gray. They will catastrophize and overgeneralize, like, well, if they told me they were going to do the dishes and then they didn't, they clearly are capable of letting me down in other ways. But again, you guys, this is not how they go around consciously thinking about things. They aren't deliberately trying to catch their partner doing them wrong. It's just unfortunately wired into their nervous system due to the childhood trauma they experienced as a preparation mechanism. Prepare for the worst, hope for the best. Because of their hypervigilance, fearful avoidants are also very mindful of shifts in their partner's moods. If their partner seems off, they tend to catastrophize, thinking they must be off because they're upset with them or something in the relationship. Now, their partner could just be having a bad day or just be off because they're human and it be like that sometimes. Nothing to do with their partner at all, but the fearful avoidant will assume it's something relationship related. Again, this is because they often were responsible for their parents' mood or emotions when they were a child. So they take this responsibility and project it onto their romantic partners in adulthood as well. Let's talk about the fearful avoidant's biggest need in a relationship. FAs are deep feelers, and because of this, their biggest need is to be seen, heard, and understood by their partner. They also have a desire to deeply know and understand their partner as well. It's a two-way street in this sense, not just an all about me sort of thing for the FA. They value affection, openness, vulnerability, and transparency in their relationships because the more they know and understand their partner and vice versa, the more they are able to trust them. The kicker in all of this, though, is that the things they desire and value the most are also the very things that terrify them the most. Like we talked about, they crave closeness while simultaneously fearing it. As they open up their heart and get closer to someone, that puts them in an extremely vulnerable position because they're essentially exposing themselves to potential betrayal. Fearful avoidants typically experience the highs and lows of emotions more intensely than anxious preoccupieds, and certainly more than dismissive avoidants. Since everyone's emotional brain develops before our logical brain, these patterns are formed through felt experience, not conscious thought. That's why with attachment, you can't just out logic yourself from the emotions that are coded into your nervous system. And fearful avoidants are highly emotional beings in general, but especially in their romantic relationships. Again, we are the most complex of all the attachments. Because of this, we can tap into all four trauma responses when faced with conflict, just depending on the situation at hand. FAs are highly passionate individuals, so when conflict arises, it's often a recipe for intensity. This is part of how the fearful avoidant got its name. They fear opening up and being hurt, so therefore, they often avoid situations or conversations where the potential for betrayal is possible. It's kind of like an ignorance is bliss or a what I don't know won't hurt me mindset. The fearful avoidant is that partner that you think everything is fine until one day a minor disagreement or setback suddenly blows up into World War III, and they will rattle off everything they've been secretly upset about that's been building up over God knows how long. They're like a slow boiling pot of water inside, just collecting transgressions here and there, not saying anything about it in the moment, aka avoidance, until boom, they've finally reached their boiling point and their unexpected partner is now covered in emotional shrapnel. Fearful avoidants are the insecure attachment that fight hard and not fair. Remember how their biggest need in a relationship is to be seen, heard, and understood? Well, this need turns up a notch during conflict because they are hellbent on getting their point across and their partner seeing things from their perspective. If they feel like their partner isn't understanding their point of view, they'll repeat their position in as many different ways as they can possibly think to explain it. You will understand where they're coming from eventually, or you'll just give up. Either way, the FA must have their need of being seen, heard, and understood met, and they'll beat a dead horse until it happens. During conflict, FAs are also infamous for what is called protest behavior. Protest behavior refers to actions taken in hopes of regaining attention or reassurance from a partner. They describe our indirect attempts to resolve an attachment disruption. So, for example, say a fight happens between a couple. When it gets to a certain boiling point, the fearful avoidant can go from the trauma responses of freeze or fight to flight. This can be the FA cutting their partner off mid conflict and leaving, or threatening to break up with them. What they are subconsciously trying to achieve is their partner to chase after them, apologize for their part, try and mend the relationship, show them affection, validate their feelings, etc. But protest behavior often backfires, especially if the fearful avoidant is with a partner that leans more avoidant than them. If their protest behavior backfires, the fearful avoidant will eventually go into the fawn trauma response. Once they've had the chance to cool down and reflect on things, they're often filled with shame and regret and go back to their partner with a totally different outlook. They'll apologize incessantly and plead for the relationship to be repaired. As a healing FA, I must confess, I am definitely guilty of some major protest behavior in my past relationships. Not the finest moments for your girl. Also, if a fearful avoidant senses their partner is about to pull away from them or from the relationship, they'll withdraw too. They'll cut and run before the partner has a chance to betray them first. Again, it's all about survival and mitigating as much risk of getting hurt as humanly possible. Yikes, that was rough. But just like our anxious preoccupieds and our dismissive avoidance, along with all the sabotaging qualities of the fearful avoidant, we also have our own superpowers. We love deeply and have an innate ability to empathize with others. FA's people skills are often on point, and we have high EQ. Our unique way of being able to step into someone else's shoes and show compassion gives us a major advantage when it comes to emotional intelligence and relatability. Fearful avoidants are also very resilient and have built up a lot of grit. This is because of the hell we went through in childhood. We learned how to persevere through extremely challenging experiences. We also tend to be successful in our careers because of this grit and resiliency that we developed. We learned that we can rely on ourselves and work hard in order to accomplish difficult things. If you can't tell by now, fearful avoidants are extremely passionate people, which can be a catch 22, right? Passion can be amazing, exciting, and beautiful. But in the wrong context, that same passion can also burn things to the ground. We love hard and sometimes fight even harder. Having been on this attachment healing journey over the past, gosh, it's almost coming up on a year, which is so insane. Time freaking flies. But being on this attachment healing journey, learning about all the attachments, especially my own, has been so incredibly eye opening. No one is perfect in relationships. And as you can tell from our deep dive into the FA, there's a lot of work to be done if this is also your attachment style. As my guy Dr. John Deloney famously says, what kept us safe when we were children will eventually destroy us as adults. The hypervigilance and the scratch and claw mentality of the fearful avoidant are perfect examples of this because it can become extremely overbearing for the FA's partner. The same is true for anxious preoccupied self abandonment and the dismissive avoidance fear of closeness and vulnerability. This is what kept each of us safe as children, but it's also what goes on to destroy our relationships in adulthood if we keep holding on to these insecure attachments. Earning our attachment security is so achievable for you guys listening, whether you're an anxious preoccupied, a dismissive avoidant, or a fellow fearful avoidant. It ain't easy, okay? I am not out here promising a quick fix. It does take work. We have years of intermittent reinforcement, emotional neglect, or trauma to unlearn. But you guys, God freaking crushed it when He made the human brain. Plasticity is so fascinating. I urge you to look into it if you never have, because my goodness, the fact that we have the ability to create new neural pathways and unlearn our insecure attachment patterns is so beyond incredible. If you want to learn the science behind all of this and how to actually put into practice the metacognitive tools to heal your brain, I highly recommend going through Dr. Sarah Hensley's hybrid group coaching program. She teaches the tools of how to earn your attachment security. I went through her program myself, and no, I'm not sponsored, so I don't have any skin in the game when I'm promoting her services. I just believe in the work she's doing because it's impacted me so much. So check her out at thelovedoc.com. I'll put a link to her website in the show notes. Alrighty, guys, that does it for today. I hope you learned a lot from this fearful avoidant deep dive. And of course, just like the anxious preoccupied and the dismissive avoidant, there's still a lot more we could get into with the FA, but we'll get into other aspects in future episodes. Quick reminder, I'm still looking for an anxious preoccupied who'd be willing to share their story for an upcoming lived experience guest episode. So if you're an AP and would like to be considered as a guest, please DM me on my Instagram at the Attachment Confessions. I'm pretty sure we already have a fearful avoidant guest lined up, so I'm super pumped about that. On our next episode, we're going to do a deep dive into our friends who we all aspire to be like someday, the securely attached. So you won't want to miss it. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today and for all your love and support of this podcast. I hope y'all have an amazing next couple of weeks, and I'll see you back here on the Attachment Confessions next time. Love you guys. Bye.